The royal ship Calvet Spire moved. Through the dark space between stars, it was a huge ship built for comfort and power, carrying the heir of the Thessar Empire to a meeting that would decide the future of two worlds. Inside, the halls were wide and clean, lit with soft blue light. Guards in silver armor stood at every corner. At the center of it all walked Princess Elira Vathrin, heir to the throne, young and proud, with eyes that had never once looked at a human with respect. Elira had grown up hearing stories about humans. Her people, the Thessar, were old and advanced. They had ships that could cross galaxies, weapons that could level mountains, and a history that stretched back 10,000 years. Humans, by comparison, were new. They had only left their home planet few hundred years ago. To the Thessar nobles, humans were loud, messy, and dangerous in the way that wild animals were dangerous, not in a way that earned respect. So when her father, the Emperor, told her that a human soldier would join her personal guard as part of a new treaty between Earth and the Thessar Empire, she had argued for an hour. It did not matter. Her father said it was necessary. Earth had grown stronger and trade between the two powers needed trust. Adding a human guard to the princess's own detail was a gesture, sign of good faith. Elira hated it. She thought it was beneath her. The human's name was Ronan Call. He had been a soldier on Earth for many years, fighting in conflicts most people in the Thessar Empire didn't even know existed. He was not loud or arrogant. He moved quietly and watched everything. When the Thessar guards mocked him under their breath, calling him the pet, he said nothing. He simply did his job, standing near the princess wherever she went, watching the halls, the doors, the faces of everyone who passed. Elira noticed this too. She noticed how he never groveled, never bowed his head the way her own guards did. He treated her with simple respect, nothing more and nothing less, and that bothered her more than anything else. She was used to people fearing her, admiring her, fawning over her title. Ronan did none of that. To Elira, his quiet calm felt like an insult. 3 days into the journey, things came to a point. Elira was walking through the ship's main hall, heading toward a meeting with her advisors, annoyed about a delay in the ship's schedule. She turned a corner quickly and nearly walked into Ronan, who had stepped forward to check a side corridor before she passed through it. It was a normal thing for a guard to do, a basic safety check, but Elira, already in a foul mood, saw it differently. She saw a human stepping in her way, blocking her path without permission. Move, she said, sharp and cold. Ronan stepped back at once, giving her room, exactly as he should have. But Elira wasn't finished. She felt embarrassed in front of her advisors, who had seen the human get close to her, who had seen her stumble half a step. To her, this was not just an inconvenience. It was a public failure, and she needed someone to blame. "You do not step in front of me," she said, her voice rising. "You do not touch the air I walk through. Do you understand your place here, soldier?" Ronan's face did not change. "Understood, princess. I was checking the corridor for safety. It won't happen again." His calm voice only made her angrier. She wanted him to flinch, to apologize, with fear in his eyes, the way her own people did when she raised her voice. Instead, he stood there, steady like. Her anger meant nothing to him, and that, more than anything, was what broke her control. Without thinking, Alara raised her hand and slapped him across the face. Sound cracked through the hall. Every guard, every advisor, every servant nearby froze in place. No one moved. No one breathed. Ronan's head turned slightly from the force of the blow. A small red mark formed on his cheek, but he did not step back, did not raise his hand, did not show any anger on his face. He simply turned his head back to look at her, calm as still water, and said quietly, "Understood, princess." That was it. No protest, no demand for an apology, no call for justice, just those two words spoken in the same even tone he used for everything else. The silence in the hall stretched on, heavy and strange. Alara had expected to feel powerful after the slap, the way she always felt when she put someone in their place. Instead, she felt a small, uncomfortable twist in her stomach, though she would never have admitted it. She turned sharply and walked away, her advisors hurrying to follow her, leaving Ronan standing alone in the hall with the other guards. For a long moment, none of the Fessar guards said anything. Then one of them, an older guard named Threll, who had served the royal family for decades, walked over to Ronan and looked at him carefully. He expected to see anger hidden behind that calm face, or maybe humiliation. Instead, he saw nothing at all, just quiet patience, as if being slapped by royalty was no different than being rained on. "You are not angry?" Threll asked, genuinely curious. "Anger doesn't help me do my job," Ronan said simply. "She's scared about something. People who feel safe don't act like that." Threll frowned, confused by the response. He had expected resentment, maybe even hatred. Instead, the human had read the princess's anger like a puzzle to solve, not an insult to revenge. It was a strange way of thinking, one Threll had never seen. Among his own people, who valued pride and honor above almost everything else. He walked away, still turning the humans' words over in his mind, unsure what to make of them. The story of the slap spread through the ship within hours. Some of the younger Thessar guards laughed about it, glad to see the human put in his place. Others, like Threll, felt a quiet unease. They couldn't explain. Something about the way Ronan had reacted, or rather had not reacted, did not fit the picture they had of humans. As wild and uncontrolled, it almost looked like discipline. Real discipline, the kind built through hard experience, not just training. Alara, alone in her quarters that night, sat by the window and stared out at the stars sliding past. She told herself she had done nothing wrong. He was a guard. She was royalty. That was the order of things, and it would remain the order of things no matter how many treaties her father signed. But she kept thinking about his eyes. There had been no fear in them, no anger either, just quiet attention, as if he was studying her, learning something about her that she didn't fully understand herself. It bothered her more than she wanted to admit. She told herself it didn't matter. He was just a soldier, just a piece of the treaty, nothing more. She had no way of knowing that within 2 days her life would depend entirely on that same quiet, watchful soldier she had struck without a second thought. Far ahead in the empty dark beyond the ship's path, a different kind of danger was already moving toward them, drawn by rumors of a royal transport carrying riches and a future empress. And pirates did not care at all about treaties, titles, or who was allowed to slap whom. News of the slap moved through the Calvet Spire faster than any official report ever could. By the next morning, almost everyone on the ship had heard some version of the story. Some versions made the princess sound stronger, more in control. Other versions, whispered quietly between servants and lower guards, made her sound cruel and small. No version of the story made Ronan look weak. If anything, the way he had simply taken the blow and said two calm words made people more curious about him, not less. Threll, the older guard who had spoken to Ronan right after the incident, found himself watching the human more closely. Over the next 2 days, he noticed small things he had missed before. Ronan never stood in the same spot for long. He always positioned himself where he could see at least 2 ways in and 1 way out. When servants walked past, carrying trays or supplies, he glanced at their hands first, then their faces. When a loud noise echoed from somewhere in the ship, every Thessar guard turned toward it out of simple surprise, but Ronan was already moving before the sound even finished, placing himself between the noise and the princess's door. Threll mentioned this to the other senior guards during a meal break. He moves like he expects something to go wrong all the time, Threll said, not nervous, just ready. One of the younger guards, Vass, laughed at this. Humans are animals who fight with their hands because they don't have better weapons. That's not skill, that's just what happens when a species spends all its history hitting each other with rocks. Thrall did not laugh. He had seen real soldiers before, the kind shaped by actual war, not just training simulations. There was something in Ronan's stillness that reminded him of veterans from the old border conflicts decades ago, men and women who had stopped reacting to danger with panic because panic had nearly got them killed too many times. It was not the behavior of someone untrained, it was the opposite. Princess Alira, for her part, tried to act as though nothing had changed. She gave her orders, she attended her meetings, she walked through the halls with her head high the way she always had, but she found herself glancing at Ronan more than she wanted to admit, watching him out of the corner of her eye as he stood near doorways or walked a few steps behind her. He never mentioned the slap, he never acted differently toward her because of it. He simply continued doing his job with the same quiet attention as before, and that consistency annoyed her in a new way. She had expected him to either avoid her out of fear or resent her openly. He did neither. During one meeting with her advisors, the conversation turned to the ship's route. They were passing through region of space called the Greyfall Corridor, a stretch of mostly empty stars used by traders because it was faster than the main lanes. It had a reputation for being risky since Thessar patrol ships rarely went that far out, but the royal transport's own defenses were considered more than enough to handle any trouble. Alira only half listened to this part of the briefing. Her ship was strong. She had no reason to worry about pirates or raiders. That kind of danger belonged to smaller, less protected vessels. Ronan, standing quietly near the back of the room as he always did during these meetings, listened more carefully than anyone else present. He asked a single question when the briefing ended: how many escort ships are with us right now? The advisor in charge of the route looked almost annoyed at being asked something so basic by a guard. 2, he said. We rely on speed and the Spire's own defenses for most of the journey. Escort numbers increase closer to the destination, and in the Greyfall corridor. Specifically, still too, there's no reason to expect trouble. There, Ronan nodded once and said nothing else. But something in his expression had shifted slightly. A small narrowing of focus that Thrall, watching from across the room, picked up on immediately. After the meeting ended and the advisors filed out, Thrall approached him. "You don't like the route," Thrall said. It wasn't a question. 2 escorts for a ship carrying the Empire's heir through a corridor known for piracy with no extra patrols, Ronan said. "On Earth we'd call that a mistake waiting to happen. The Spire's own defenses are strong," Thrall said, though even as he said it, he found himself less certain than he wanted to be. Strong doesn't matter if the people inside aren't ready to use them fast enough, Ronan replied. Strength without readiness is just a slower way to lose. Thrall didn't respond right away. He had served on the ship for years and had never once seen real combat outside of training exercises. None of the younger guards had either. The Thessar Empire had been at peace more or less for over a generation, and its royal guards were chosen as much for their loyalty and appearance as for actual battle skill. Ronan, by contrast, had spent years in conflicts that never stopped long enough to let soldiers grow soft. That evening, Alira summoned Ronan to her quarters, not to discuss the slap, but because she had grown curious. Despite herself, she told herself it was simply because she wanted to understand the human better for diplomatic reasons. Nothing more. "You asked about our escort numbers today," she said when he arrived, standing near her window with her arms crossed. "Why?" "Habit," Ronan said. "Where I come from, you always know how exposed you are. It's the difference between surviving and attack and not." "This isn't Earth," Alira said. "We are not constantly at war." "No," Ronan agreed, "but pirates don't care whose empire you belong to. They care what you're carrying and how hard it is to take it from you." Alira studied him for a moment, trying to find some trace of fear or resentment in his voice after what she had done to him 2 days earlier. She found none, just calm honesty, delivered the same way he delivered everything else. "You're not angry with me," she said, finally unable to stop herself from asking, "Would it help either of us if I was?" Ronan asked. The question caught her off guard. No one had ever responded to her that way before. Her own people either feared her enough to never challenge her or respected her title enough to let things go out of duty. Ronan seemed to operate on neither fear nor duty alone. He simply weighed things by whether they were useful, and anger in his eyes clearly wasn't. "You're a strange kind of soldier," she said. "I'm a soldier who's been wronged before and paid for it," Ronan said. "I try not to repeat mistakes." Alira didn't know what to say to that, so she dismissed him for the evening, more confused by him than she had been before the conversation started. As he left her quarters and resumed his post outside her door, she sat by her window again, watching the stars of the Greyfall corridor begin to surround the ship on all sides, unaware that somewhere out in that same dark stretch of space, a group of pirate ships had already detected the Calvet Spire's signature and begun closing in, patient and quiet, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The attack started without warning, the way real attacks always do. One moment the Calvet Spire moved quietly through the Greyfall corridor, its halls calm and lit with soft blue light. The next moment, alarms screamed through every corridor as 3 pirate ships dropped out of hidden positions and opened fire on the 2 escort vessels before anyone on the spire even registered what was happening. Princess Elara was in the middle of a quiet dinner with her advisors when the first explosion rocked the ship, sending plates crashing to the floor and throwing 2 of her advisors out of their chairs. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied at half their normal brightness. A voice came over the ship's speakers, tight with panic, announcing that the escort ships had been disabled and unknown vessels were attempting to breach the spire's outer hull. Ronan was already moving before the announcement finished. He had been standing near the dining hall entrance, and the moment the first explosion hit, his body reacted on instinct built from years of real combat. He grabbed Elara by the arm, pulling her away from the windows and toward the center of the room, away from anything that could shatter and become a weapon if the hull lost pressure. "Stay low, stay away from windows," he said, his voice calm but firm, completely different from the panicked voices now filling the halls outside. "What is happening?" Elara demanded, her usual command and confidence cracking under the sudden chaos. "Pirates, they took out your escorts fast, which means they planned this," Ronan said. "We need to move you somewhere defensible now." The Thessar guards in the room, trained for ceremony and protocol rather than real combat, looked to each other uncertainly, unsure of the correct procedure for a situation none of their training had ever truly prepared them for. Thrall, to his credit, recovered quickly and began directing the other guards toward the princess, but his voice carried an edge of uncertainty that Ronan's never did. "The pirates will likely target the command bridge and the royal quarters first," Ronan said, speaking fast but clearly. "They'll want control of the ship and a hostage. We need a route that avoids both of those areas until we know what we're dealing with." "You think like a pirate," Thrall said, half amazed and half unsettled. "I think like someone who's been on the wrong end of an ambush more than once," Ronan replied. "Thrall, get 2 guards to check the escape pod bay. If it's clear, that's our fallback. Everyone else with me." For a moment, Thrall hesitated, taking direction from a human guard, one his own princess had slapped just days earlier, went against every instinct his culture had built into him. But the chaos around them, the sound of distant gunfire growing louder, the ship groaning under stress it hadn't been designed to survive, left no room for pride. Thrall nodded and gave the order. They moved through the halls quickly, Ronan leading with Lyra close behind him, flanked by the remaining guards. The ship's once calm corridors were now filled with smoke from a small fire near the lower decks and the distant sound of metal screeching against metal as something forced its way through the outer hull. Twice, Ronan stopped the group suddenly, holding up a hand for silence, listening to sounds the others hadn't even noticed yet before redirecting them down a different path. "How do you know where they are?" Lyra asked during one of these pauses, her voice quieter now, stripped of its usual sharp confidence. "I don't, not exactly," Ronan said, "but ships like this only have so many paths a hostile force would use to move fast. I'm guessing based on what I'd do if I were them." They were halfway to a secondary control room, a space Ronan judged easier to defend than the others when the first pirates appeared. 3 armored figures rounded a corner. Ahead of them, weapons raised clearly, searching for exactly the group they had just found. The Thessar guards froze for half a second too long, trained reflexes failing them in the face of real, immediate danger for the first time in their lives. Ronan didn't freeze. He moved Lyra behind a support column with one hand, while raising his weapon with the other, firing 2 precise shots before the pirates could fully process what was happening. One pirate dropped instantly, the second stumbled, wounded, firing wildly as he fell. The third managed to return fire properly, forcing Ronan to pull back behind cover as shots tore into the wall beside him. The Thessar guards finally reacted, opening fire alongside Ronan, and together they managed to bring down the remaining pirate, though not before one of the younger guards took a glancing hit to the shoulder, crying out in pain and surprise more than serious injury. It was, Thrall realized as he checked on the wounded guard, the first real combat any of them had ever experienced outside of a simulation. That won't be the last group, Ronan said, already moving again, pulling Alara forward. If they're searching corridors this directly, they know roughly where the royal quarters are. They might know you're not there anymore, which means they'll start checking secondary locations soon. How can you be so calm? Alara asked, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts to control it. I'm not calm, Ronan said. I'm focused. Those are different things. Panic gets people killed. Focus keeps them alive. I learned that the hard way more than once. They reached the secondary control room moments later, and Ronan immediately began assessing it for defensibility, checking the door mechanisms, the line of sight from inside, the number of entry points the pirates could use to get in. It had one main door and one smaller maintenance hatch, both of which could be sealed and reinforced with effort. Seal both entries, Ronan ordered the remaining guards. Thrall, get me a status update on the ship systems, if any consoles in here still work. I need to know how bad this is. Thrall, despite every instinct telling him not to take orders from a guard beneath his station, moved to the console without hesitation. The old hierarchies that had defined his entire life suddenly felt distant and unimportant compared to simply staying alive. The console flickered to life, showing fragmented reports from across the ship. The bridge had been breached. The chief engineer was dead. Pirates now controlled at least a third of the spire, including critical systems that could be used to vent atmosphere from sections of the ship or disable life support entirely if they chose to. Elira, reading the reports over Thrall's shoulder, felt her confidence crumble completely for the first time in her life. The Empire's strength, its advanced ships and weapons, and 10,000 years of history meant nothing in this moment. None of it could save her, only the quiet human guard she had struck without a second thought stood between her and whatever the pirates intended to do with the Empire's heir once they found her. What do we do? She asked, her voice small in a way it had never been before. Ronan studied the console for a long moment, his mind working through options most of the people in that room had never been trained to consider. Finally, he turned to face her directly, his expression steady despite everything happening around them. "We fight smart," he said, "and you're going to have to trust me. Completely starting right now." For the first time since he had arrived on the ship, Elira nodded without a single argument. Inside the secondary control room, Ronan worked fast, his mind already 3 steps ahead of the chaos spreading through the rest of the ship. He studied the fragmented system reports on the console, ignoring the panic still flickering across the faces of the Thessar guards around him. Thrall stood close, watching everything Ronan did, no longer questioning whether a human soldier deserved to give orders. "The pirates control the bridge and engineering," Ronan said, thinking out loud as much as explaining. "That means they can cut life support to sections of the ship, but doing that risks damaging whatever cargo they came here for, which includes the princess. They won't gas the whole ship, they'll search room by room instead." "That gives us time," Thrall said. "It gives us a small window," Ronan corrected. "Not much. We need to use it." Elira, still shaken but steadier than before, forced herself to focus. "What can we actually do? Your weapons are nothing compared to theirs. Our own guards aren't trained for this." "You're right," Ronan said simply, without softening it, "standing here and trading shots with a better armed group that knows the ship layout better than we do is a losing plan. So we're not going to do that." He turned to the console again, pulling up a basic schematic of the ship's lower maintenance systems, the kind of unglamorous infrastructure nobody on a royal vessel ever thought twice about. Pipes, vents, narrow service corridors, built for repair drones rather than people. "These maintenance tunnels run under most of the ship," Ronan said, tracing a path with his finger. "They're tight, dark, and the pirates almost certainly don't know them well. Because why would boarding raiders study a ship's plumbing layout? But I do. Because on Earth, fighting in places like this taught us that the enemy's biggest weapon is usually open ground and clear lines of sight. Take those away, and a smaller, smarter group can beat a bigger one." "You want to fight them in there?" Thrall asked, glancing at the narrow tunnels on the screen with clear unease. "I want to make them fight on our terms instead of theirs," Ronan said. "Out here in open corridors, they have better weapons and better numbers. In there, none of that matters as much. Tight spaces mean one person at a time, no easy support fire, no clear angles. It evens things out." Elira studied him for a moment, the same way she had during their conversation in her quarters days earlier, trying to understand a way of thinking completely foreign to everything she'd been raised with. Her own people's military doctrine was built around overwhelming force and superior technology, never around clever use of disadvantage. The idea of deliberately choosing a harder, uglier fight because it gave you an edge was something she had never once considered. "Do what she said, whatever you need." They moved quickly, slipping into the maintenance tunnels through a hatch hidden behind a supply closet, leaving 2 guards behind to seal the control room and create the appearance that the group was still hiding there, buying time and confusion. Ronan led the way through the cramped, dimly lit tunnels, moving with a sense of direction that came from reading the schematic carefully rather than any prior knowledge of this specific ship. The first pirate group they encountered came through a junction point ahead, clearly searching the area methodically. Ronan held up a hand, signaling silence. and waited until the two pirates passed. Close enough before striking, he moved. Fast, using the cramped space to his advantage, disabling the first pirate. Before the second could even turn his weapon fully around, it was over in seconds, quiet and efficient, nothing like the wild gunfight earlier in the open corridor. "How did you?" one of the younger guards started to ask, stunned. "Close quarters favors whoever moves first and decides fastest," Ronan said. "Simply already moving on, out in the open, their weapons matter more. In here, speed and decision matter more." They continued through the tunnels, Ronan occasionally pausing to listen, adjusting their path based on sounds. Only he seemed to notice clearly. Twice more they encountered small pirate groups, and twice more Ronan handled the engagement with brutal efficiency, using the tunnels, the darkness, and simple misdirection to turn each fight into something closer to an execution than a battle. The Thessar guards, watching closely, began to understand what Thrall had sensed back at the very beginning. This wasn't wild aggression, this was discipline sharpened by experiences none of them had ever had to survive. Eventually, they reached a junction close to engineering, where Ronan had judged the pirates' central control point likely sat. Through a narrow vent they could see into the room beyond. 4 pirates standing around a console, along with what looked like the ship's actual chief engineer, alive but clearly forced to work under threat, trying to override security locks on deeper systems. If they get full control of engineering, Ronan whispered, they can disable the ship completely and take their time stripping it for anything valuable, including the princess. We need to stop this now. 4 against us, Thrall whispered back. Even with your tactics, that's doable, Ronan said, but I need your guards to actually fight like they believe they can win. Right now you're all still moving like you expect to lose. That gets people killed faster than bad odds do. Thrall looked at him, then at the other guards, all watching Ronan with a mixture of nervousness and something close to genuine respect now. For the first time, Thrall spoke not as a senior guard following protocol, but as someone choosing to follow a leader he actually believed in. "Tell us exactly what to do," Thrall said. Ronan laid out a simple plan, using the vent system to create a distraction in one corner of the room while the main group entered from the main door, timed to the second. It required trust, precise timing, and a willingness from the Thessar guards to commit fully without hesitation, something none of them had ever been asked to do before in real combat. When the moment came, it played out almost exactly as Ronan described. The distraction pulled 2 of the pirates' attention toward the vent just long enough for Ronan and the guards to breach the main door, moving fast and decisively instead of cautiously. The fight that followed was short and brutal, ending with all 4 pirates down and the chief engineer safe, shaking but unharmed, freed from his captors. "Lock down the bridge override," Ronan told the engineer immediately. "Cut their remote access to the ship systems now before they regroup." The engineer, recognizing competent leadership when he saw it, moved instantly to comply, his hands working the console with desperate focus. Within minutes, critical ship systems were secured, locking the remaining pirates out of any further control over life support, navigation, or weapon systems throughout the spire. Elara stood in the doorway, watching all of it unfold, watching her own guards fight and win under the direction of the human she had struck without a second thought just days earlier. Something inside her, some deep assumption she had carried her entire life about who deserved respect and who didn't, had snorts begun to crack completely apart, and she knew, standing there in the smoke and the noise, that it would never fully go back together the same way again. With engineering secured and the bridge locked out of pirate control, the remaining raiders scattered, no longer organized enough to mount any real resistance. Within the hour, the few pirates still on board were either captured or had fled back to their ships, which broke off and retreated once it became clear the Calvet Spire would not fall as easily as they had planned. By the time the ship's main systems came back online fully, the danger had passed, leaving behind damaged corridors, a handful of wounded guards, and a silence that felt very different from the silence before the attack. Princess Elara stood near the same dining hall where the chaos had first begun, looking at the scorched wall panels and shattered glass still being cleared away by ship staff. She felt strange, lighter somehow, though she couldn't fully explain why to herself. Hours earlier, she had been certain of everything, her place in the universe, the order of things, the idea that some people existed to lead and others existed to serve. Now none of that felt as solid as it once had. Ronan stood nearby, quietly checking it with the wounded guards, making sure they had received proper care, speaking with the same calm steadiness he had shown through the entire ordeal. He didn't act like someone who had just saved an empire's heir and turned the tide of a battle through sheer skill and discipline. He acted like someone simply finishing a job that needed finishing. Thrall approached him first before the princess could. The older guard stood a little straighter than usual, as if preparing himself for something difficult. "I have served this family for 20 years, Thrall said. "I have trained under masters who claim to teach the finest combat skills in the Empire. I have never seen anyone do what you did today. I had good people backing me up," Ronan said, "including you." Thrall shook his head slightly. "You taught us how to actually use what we had. We were soldiers in name only. Before today, you made us soldiers in truth." He paused, then added quietly, "I owe you an apology too. I called your kind animals in my own head more than once. I was wrong." "You don't owe me anything," Ronan said. "You showed up when it mattered. That's what counts." Thrall studied him for a long moment, clearly unused to having his apology brushed aside so simply, then nodded and stepped back, allowing the princess to approach. Elara walked toward Ronan slowly, very aware of every guard and crew member still nearby, watching this moment unfold. She had spent her entire life learning how to maintain perfect composure in front of others, how to never show weakness or uncertainty. Yet here, in front of the man she had struck without thought just days before, she found herself struggling to find the right words. "You saved my life today," she said, finally, more than once. "It's the job," Ronan said simply. "It's more than the job," Elara said, her voice firmer now, though still quieter than her usual commanding tone. "I treated you like you were beneath me. I struck you in front of my entire court because I was embarrassed and needed someone to blame. You had every reason to resent me, to hesitate when it mattered most to let pride get in the way of duty. You didn't. Ronan considered this for a moment before responding. Where I come from, we learn early that pride gets people killed faster than almost anything else. I couldn't afford to hold on to what happened in that hallway, not when your life depended on clear thinking instead. That's not an answer to what I did. Elira said, I'm not asking you to excuse it. I'm telling you I was wrong about that. And about more than just that. For the first time since they had met, Ronan's calm expression shifted. Slightly, something close to quiet. Respect showing through. Most people in your position wouldn't say that out loud, he said, especially not in front of others. Most people in my position have never had their entire understanding of the universe challenged in a single day. Elira said, I was raised to believe my people stood above yours, that your history of conflict made you primitive rather than capable. I watched you turn that same history into the only thing that saved this ship. Today, I cannot unsee that now, even if I wanted to. She extended her hand toward him, not in the formal way nobility offered hands to be kissed or bowed over, but simply as one person might offer respect to another. Ronan looked at it for a brief moment before taking it firmly, the gesture feeling far more significant than its simplicity suggested. I would like you to remain as my guard, Elira said, not because the treaty requires it, because I trust you. And that's not something I give easily. I'll stay, Ronan said. Someone has to keep teaching your guards how to actually survive a real fight instead of just looking sharp at ceremonies. A small, surprised laugh escaped Elira. The first genuine laugh anyone had heard from her in days. It startled even her, breaking through the weight of everything that had happened. Threll, still standing nearby, allowed himself a small smile as well, something he rarely did while on duty. Later that night, as the Calvert Spire continued its journey toward its original destination, now flanked by emergency reinforcements that had finally arrived, Elira stood once again by her window, watching the stars. Things felt different now, though the universe outside her window looked exactly the same as it always had. It was her understanding of that universe that had changed. She thought about everything she had been taught about humans, that they were young, reckless, dangerous in an uncontrolled way. She realized now that what her people had mistaken for recklessness was something closer to hard-earned wisdom, built through struggles, her own empires. Long peace had never forced them to face. Humanity hadn't survived its own violent history by accident. It had survived by learning, adapting, and refusing to break. Lessons written into people like Ronan in ways that no amount of advanced technology could replace. Word of what happened aboard the Spire would eventually spread far beyond the ship itself, reaching both the Thessar Empire's court and Earth's own leadership. Some among her people would dismiss the story, clinging to old prejudices too deeply rooted to shake loose so easily. Others, like Threll, would never look at humans the same way again. And somewhere in the vast space between two very different worlds, a fragile treaty grew a little stronger, built not on official documents alone, but on the quiet, steady actions of one soldier who refused to let anger or pride get in the way of doing what needed to be done. As for Ronan, he simply returned to his post outside the princess's door. That Knight standing watch the same way he had every night before the attack, calm and alert, exactly as he always was. He didn't think of himself as a hero, he thought of himself as someone who had done his job, the same job he intended to keep doing for as long as it was needed. Slap or no slap, empire or no empire, one quiet steady step at a time.